Hi, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to Chana Power Hour. Here's where we get together to learn and strengthen ourselves in our special mitzvahs of Kashrus, Shabbos, and Taras Mishpacha, as well as other halachas pertinent to women. Our goal is to prepare ourselves in our homes to welcome Mashiach. Tonight's class is dedicated to Ilai Nishmas Reb Shalom ben Michal Alav Shalom. Halacha was important to him, and may our learning tonight bring his neshama and aliyah. If you'd like to dedicate a class in honor or nitzchas of someone, please reach out to us by email, projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com. And of course, please join us afterwards for Tzedakah, Tillim, and Mashiach thought. So let's get right into it. For our first class, we will be continuing with part 9 of our topic on Birchas Hanehenin, brachas before and after eating foods. We've learned so many interesting and practical halachas so far, and we are excited to continue. We are grateful to have Rabbi Bell back on our program. Rabbi Bell is the Rav of Congregation Lubavitch in Montreal and the Dayan of Beis in Montreal. Thank you so much for making time to be here tonight.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. I hope everybody's gaining from the shiurim. Birchas Hanehenin, as we mentioned before, is printed in the Siddur and the many detailed halachas which need to be reviewed quite frequently. I had some unfinished business from last week, but I think I'm going to push that off till later to be able to cover more in a more understandable manner. So I'm going to speak today about the law of kadima bebrachas, about which bracha comes before which. It's known that this is a very complex area in Jewish law, famous stories from the Rabbeim, being people trying to trip them up, so on and so forth. I'm going to try to simplify it. And first, as an introduction, is also part of the hashkafa, but it also helps us understand the halacha. We have different types of brachas for different foods. All the Chachamim made the brachas, so they made for the most important foods, the most chashuv foods, hametzi, so bread gets its own bracha, wine gets its own bracha, berei priyagofen. And then when we get to more general foods, so then we have categories. You have berei priya eitz, that even though the tree grows from the ground, but it gets a special bracha. As we learned earlier, when you make an eitz, when you make an adama. And then adama is food which grows from the ground. And then we have a shahakol, which is a general category, including everything else. The halacha requires that we praise Hashem in according to the particular nature of what it is He created. I just wanted to mention that the Shari B'tachon is something that people frequently learn. One of the things he says there at the very end of the last chapter, so he speaks about things which might inhibit one's B'tachon, and he mentions that whatever inhibited previous Sha'arim, the previous chapters, also makes impediment for B'tachon as well. And Shar B'tachon is the fourth of the Sha'arim. So the first one is about the oneness of Hashem. The second one's called Shara Bechina, which is recognizing Hashem's hand in the world. Third is Shara Vedas Elokim, but the second Shara, I wanted to mention something there. He speaks, the Chavos Levava speaks about how important it is to recognize Hashem's kindness in every single detail of the creation. So he speaks about Daimim, about inanimate objects, and Semeach, and plant life, and all different sorts of animal life, and all the different dimensions of human life, and goes into tremendous detail. And he says it's important to understand the oneness of Hashem, to go into all the details and recognize how things are different. And Hashem, it's like a light that comes down through a prism, and then it splits off into all different sorts of colors. Now, Birchas is also that the main Gilui of Ein Sof, that we see Hashem's infinity, specifically through all different sorts of separate things. So when one praises Hashem according to that category, so that maximizes the praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore one has to know when it comes time to make a bracha, which bracha you make before the other one. And a primary consideration we'll see over here, people often think that when you want to know which food to make the bracha on first, that you have to know all about the food. Whereas we'll soon see in today's shir that since you're the one making the bracha and it's your praise of Hashem that's being accomplished over here, what you consider to be more chaviv takes often primary importance. And out of all the different factors that you might look into, what the bracha is, it's a common misconception. People think that eitz comes before an adama. We're soon going to see that that's consideration that comes all the way at the end. The primary consideration in most cases, in many cases certainly, is going to be whether it's chaviv, and because then your praise of Hashem is much deeper when this is the food that you desire to eat the most. So I put this together to make it easier to understand in a PowerPoint. So I hope everybody can see that. Visible? Okay. So I'm not going to be speaking about Hametzi Mezenis and Brei Pri Hagafen. There are many laws regarding the brachas on different types of bread, whole breads or piece of bread, different types of bread. I'm not going to be speaking about that. That's a different subject. What we're going to be speaking about today is primarily ha'etz, excuse me, when you're not in the middle of a meal and you don't have any of these foods. We're talking basically about an eitz and a dama and a shahakal. You have eitz for the fruits and a dama for the vegetables and things that grow from the ground, and kitnias, beans, and things of the sort, and then shahakal for everything else. Fine. So first, let's speak about you have a shahakal in comparison with beirei pri, or eitz, or adama. So according to the introduction I gave you, so we understand that the more detailed and specific the bracha is, the greater the praise of Hashem. So in general, shahakal is not a specification at all. It just is a general category. So therefore, beirei pri eitz and brei pri adama, in comparison with a shakal, if you have a brei pri eitz and a shahakal, what do you make the bracha on first? So you obviously make the bracha. Brei pri eitz comes first, because the shahakal is not considered to be detailed at all. If you have a brei pri adama with a shahakal, so then again, a brei pri adama comes before the shahakal, because the shahakal does not have any specific application. It's a catch-all category, so to speak. The question comes between eitz and adama. Following the same logic, one might think that you should always make an eitz before an adama, because the eitz, the fruit on the tree, is more specific and more limited, and one would think that it would therefore take precedence over the bracha brei pri adama. So there is an opinion that says like that, but that is not really the halacha, as we'll see. So now that's the next case now, is when you have an eitz and an adama, and what do you make the bracha on first? So you have, there's a common thing about a man. You have a shalom zachar, so there's arbis, there's chickpeas there, and then there's some fruit. So which do they make the bracha on first? So the main consideration, which one is chaviv? Which one do you like better? How exactly you define that? Because there could be people, they always like, given a choice between potato chips and apples, they'll eat the potato chips, okay? And it's always like that. There might be some other foods that, in general, they might prefer this one, but at this particular moment, they feel like having apples. Which one is definition of chaviv? We'll leave that. I don't think we're going to get to that today, but that is a discussion, how exactly you define it. But let's, for the purposes of today's class, in general, what do you consider to be more chaviv? Okay, so then we look at the different possibilities. One possibility is the eitz is chaviv. You like the fruit better than the potato chip or the chickpeas, whatever the case is. That's one possibility. Then you can have the other possibility that the adama is chaviv, that you like that one better. So the guiding principle is over here, is whichever one chaviv you make first. So if you like the apple better than the potato chips, you make on the apple. But if you like the potato chips better than the apple, then you make the bracha on the potato chips. So in eitz, where did this concept come from? That an eitz comes before the adama. Here we have the potato chips with the apple. Fine. Where did that come from? When they both have the same chavivus, you don't have a preference. The Alter Rebbe didn't taste food b'chal. That's the famous story with they put double the salt and he didn't taste any salt at all. So if a person doesn't have one which is chaviv here. So in that case, so the halacha says the eitz goes before the adama. And the reason that that's in yellow is that's not even really a requirement. It's not a din. Okay? Alter Rebbe says, Teiv, it's a good thing to do. We have in these dinim of kedima b'brachas, there's so many different opinions and such a complex subject. The Alter Rebbe uses 3 different expressions just in these 3 halachas. In the Birchas and Perek Yud, halachas vav through ches. So sometimes he says that it's an obligation. So the first 2 cases, that if it's chaviv, you say that first, that's an obligation. That's a clear halacha. Other cases, the Alter Rebbe says, mitzvah min muvchar. That's the best way to do the mitzvah. It's not mamash a requirement. Al pi din, you could say on either one first, but it's the best mitzvah min muvchar. It's the best way to do the mitzvah, to say one before the other. And sometimes the Alter Rebbe doesn't even say that. It's not. It's a teif. It's a good thing to do. So the eitz before the adama is a good thing to do, but only if they're both chaviv. If one of them you prefer to the other, you have to make the bracha on that first. Okay, next case. Let's say included in the ha'etz is something from the shivas aminim. So we have in the shivas aminim, you have 2 types of grain. You have chitu sa'era, and then you have 5 different types of fruits. So how important is that as a consideration? What does it do to this picture? So the answer is basically almost nothing. The same halacha applies. We look and see which is more chaviv. So if the eitz is chaviv, then of course the eitz goes before the adama. Let's say we're doing potato chips with pomegranates. And pomegranates is from the 5 fruits that are included in the shivas aminim. So there's potato chips and there's pomegranates. Which do you prefer? So if you prefer the pomegranates, so then it's shivas aminim, and you prefer it's chaviv, so for sure it goes first. But what happens if the adam is chaviv? The din is you make on the potato chips, even though the other one is shivas aminim. What happens if they're both the same chavivas? Again, this we're going to make on the pomegranate, but not because it's a shivas aminim. It goes back to the exact same din we had before, that the eitz goes before the adama. Okay, so basically, when it comes to remembering this halacha, it makes no difference whatsoever whether it's something from the shivas aminim or not. We'll have a case soon that it does make a difference, but when I have an eitz versus an adama, and 2 different brachas, then it's not going to make any difference. Now, let's say you have 2 different types of food, but they both have the same bracha. So let's say you have pomegranates and apples. Both of them are ha'etz, or for that matter, you have potato chips and chickpeas. Whatever the case is, it's the same bracha. So what is the din? So let's first take the Alter Rebbe's phrase that he's going to use over here a number of times. It's a mitzvah and a muvchar. That once, let me just explain something here. Once it's the same bracha, as I said in the introduction, that the main idea of which bracha comes before the other is the praise of Hashem that you're giving, and the praise of Hashem is dependent largely on what is chaviv to you is going to be expressed on which bracha comes before the other one. But if they have the same bracha, it doesn't really make as much of a difference. It's the exact same bracha. You're anyway praising Hashem. You made Brei Pri Adama, whatever it is that you're making the bracha. So then the chavivas then doesn't have as much of a factor. We're going to look more at the food. But since the chavivas here is not affecting the bracha, so then it's only going to be a mitzvah and a muvchar of the various alternatives we're going to have. Okay. So the first thing we look at over here is not chavivas. We're going to look at the food itself, and we're going to look at its physical form. Is it a whole fruit, a whole piece of food, or is it a piece of food? Is it a whole orange, a whole banana, a whole chickpea, or is it half? Has it been cut into pieces? So we have 2 possible cases. We have a case when one of the foods, again, it's the same, it's 2 different foods, the same bracha. If you have one, you have a whole orange and a piece of apple. What's the din? So the din is that you make on the whole before you make on the piece. But even then, it's not a chiyuv. It's a mitzvah and a muvchar. It's the proper thing to do. It's the best way to do the mitzvah. But that's why I put it in yellow, because it's a mitzvah and a muvchar. It's not a chiyuv gomer. It's not an absolute binding halacha. You should make on the whole one before the piece. But let's say you don't have that as a factor. Both of them are whole, or both of them are pieces. So then what's the din? So in such a case, then we look and see which is more chaviv. Since they're both whole anyway, there's a whole apple and a whole orange, so which one do you prefer? So then again, it's a mitzvah muvchar to make on the one that is more chaviv before the less chaviv. And so too, if you have a piece of orange and a piece of apple, then the same thing would apply. Where it gets one more step, and this is the last slide for today, I guess, and the last halacha when it comes to this, is let's say they have the same bracha, but you also have the shivas haminim. The shivas haminim are included here, so you have the brachas. We don't have an adama from the shivas haminim, but for this, the purpose of this halacha, we're not talking about all 7 of the minim. We're leaving out chita se'era are the first ones there in the pasuk, so we're leaving them out, and we're only talking about the last 5, all the fruits. So this case, if you have the same bracha and it's all shivas haminim, then we're only talking about the bracha ha'etz. Okay, so you have, let's say, pomegranates and apple, something of the sort. So then, what is going to make the final decision? So over here, we're going back to the concept of chaviv. Okay, so since we have the shivas haminim over here, so the Alter Rebbe brings back in this whole concept of chaviv. It's interesting. It goes back to the Mishnah, that there's a machlekes in the Mishnah. If you have something which is shivas haminim and something which is chaviv, which one takes precedence? And it's there's 2 opinions in the Mishnah, and there's 2 opinions in the Rishonim, which one we paskin like, which takes precedence. And what's going to be the final conclusion, according to Alter Rebbe, they're going to basically have equal power. But let's walk it through for a second. Let's say you have the apple and the pomegranate, and it does not mention whether it's shalom or not shalom over here. It just mentions whether it's shivas haminim, whether it's chaviv. So let's say you prefer pomegranates to apples. That's one possibility. The shivas haminim is chaviv. Okay? Another possibility is the one which is not the shivas haminim, is chaviv. By you, the apples is chaviv. Okay, and then we have an intermediate situation in which you don't have a preference. You like apples and you like pomegranates, or you don't like apples equally to not liking pomegranates, but you're going to eat both of them anyway, for whatever reason. So then, what's going to be the din? So the reason the 2 on the left have the same color because they have the same din. So obviously, if we have the pomegranates are more chaviv to the person prefers eating pomegranates, so then you have both factors intact. So you have something from the shivas haminim, something not from the shivas haminim. The shivas haminim is chaviv. You like better the pomegranates than the apples, so you're going to make the bracha on the pomegranates before the apples. I say before the apples. I don't mean before the apples. You're going to make the bracha only on the pomegranates. You're going to make the bracha on the pomegranates, and you're not going to make a bracha on the apples at all. The same thing I realize in retrospect, and I said in the previous slide also, when I was talking about making the same bracha, I said before. It's not really before. You're only going to make one bracha. You cannot make an eitz on the pomegranate, then another eitz on the apple if they're both in front of you and you intend at the time to be eating both. Over here, the law of kedima brachas is which food do you make the bracha on, but you're only going to make one bracha. Fine. So since the pomegranates are chaviv and it's also shivas haminim, then there's no question. You make the bracha on that. As I mentioned, there's a disagreement among the halachic authorities which one takes precedence, and it goes all the way back to the Gemara, all the way back to the Rishonim and the Gemara, and all the way back to the Mishnah. 2 opinions in the Mishnah, and that's the disagreement goes all the way down to the contemporary poskim. Which opinion do we pass like? Is the main thing shivas haminim or the main thing which is chaviv? But in this case, it's both shivas haminim and chaviv, so there's no question whatsoever. You make the bracha on the shivas haminim, which is also chaviv. You have both factors. Okay, if they're both the same chavivas, then it's not one against the other. It's the chavivas that both of them are equally chaviv. So then the only factor left, shivas haminim. So you make the bracha on the shivas haminim. So that's also clear. So both of them have the exact same din. The question is going to be if you like apples better than pomegranates. The one which is not Shivas Aminim is more chaviv to you. And that we have two opinions. And what the Alter Rebbe does in this case, like the Taz, he says that they're equal. It's an interesting lashon. It says if you make the bracha, be'ezem hem sheyirtze. So that expression is used in the Gemara sometimes to mean chaviv. In this context, it doesn't mean chaviv. We just say then the one which is chaviv. All discussion of why it is that particular expression is used, and is it sometimes the same words are used in the Gemara could mean one thing, and then it comes by later commentaries. A couple thousand years go by, and 1,500 years, whatever, it's used in a different context. So, in such a case where you have the two factors in conflict, that one is Shivas Aminim, but the one which is not Shivas Aminim is more Chaviv, so then there's no preference in halacha. Both of them are equal, and it doesn't matter which one you make the bracha on first. So, I think I've used my time period, and I'm finished.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bell. Thank you. That was so clear.
Cool.
Okay, so for our next class on Kashrus, we'll be continuing our series of the Kosher Consumer's Practical Shopper's Guide, part number 8. In this series, we focus on different aspects of being a knowledgeable consumer. Because when we have knowledge, we can use it to uphold proper Kashrus standards in our homes. We are grateful to have Rabbi Zibell back on our program. Rabbi Zibell is a Kashrus administrator at the RCF, the Rabbinate of Central Florida, and delivers classes to the general public on various Kashrus topics. He's also highly active in answering consumers' Kashrus questions on a daily basis. Rabbi Zibell is known for his practical grasp and application of Kashrus knowledge, as well as his clear way of explaining halachic matters. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
A pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. Good evening. So we are holding at the Practical Kosher Shopper's Guide, part number 8. A very, very brief recap of last class. We discussed various products, including different types of prepared fish, and when it comes to Bishul Yisrael and other aspects, when it comes to that, as well as cereals, and when it comes to Pas Yisrael and Bishul Yisrael, that and gluten-free products. Basically products that a person may buy in a place like that's not, it may not be found in a regular Hamish store, but if someone's going to shop at a store which is like Costco or the like, which will have all types of products, how to be an educated consumer to only be buying something that's going to be to the high standard that you want to be keeping. So we're going to continue now on this thread. Another thing which comes up pretty often is people ask about juice, if it's whether it's 100% orange juice or 100% apple juice. Or just this morning, somebody asked about 100% carrot juice. All it says is just cold pressed 100% carrot juice, nothing else to it. What could be wrong with that? Does that need a hashgacha? Or sometimes 100% juice could have a weaker hashgacha, like for example, very commonly, the triangle K. In such a case, do you need a good hashgacha for such juices, and or is a weaker one okay, or do you need one altogether? So the answer is that juices do need a good hashgacha, and the reason for that is because the juices are pasteurized naturally. The way Hashem made it is that when you squeeze fruit juice, various enzymes and other bacteria and things that are in yeasts that are found in the juice and in the environment come into contact, and right away, if it's not pasteurized, the juice will slowly start to in the process of fermentation, and ultimately will go bad, can start becoming fizzy or sour, or ultimately even alcoholic, and go bad. And pasteurization was a process that was invented to kill all those things that are present, so that you can keep the juice much longer without all these different things developing. And it's a process of bringing the juice to a certain hot temperature that kills all those bacteria or potential yeasts, whatever it is that could be that's going to develop within the juice. All that is killed by heating it. And it's actually most juices are going to be on the shelf life unless they're squeezing it for you right fresh orange juice from a machine right in front of you. They need to be pasteurized, otherwise after a few days the bottle is just going to start bloating up, and it's not practical to deal with that in mass production. So pretty much all juices are pasteurized. That means they're going through machinery at a hot temperature, and those factories are not always doing juice 24/7, 365, just orange juice. They may be doing other juices, including grape juice, which grape juice would be stam yenam, which is usr. Or sometimes you could even be doing dairy. Milk is common as well to be done on the same pasteurization equipment as juices. So at minimum, the juice could be an issue of grape, stam yenam, or an issue of dairy, chalav akum. And even in some extreme situations, it's been found that the factory will switch and will use the equipment to even pasteurize things like chicken soup that's going to be bottled or put in containers. And that absolutely treif to be using such equipment. So therefore, anything pasteurized would need to have a good hashgacha to make sure that they're addressing that if there is anything that they're koshering the equipment properly. So that's that. And this includes as well cold brew coffee. Sometimes people ask, what do you mean? It just says 100% coffee. And we know that unflavored coffee doesn't need hashgacha. So now they just added a little water. That now it needs hashgacha just because of the water. But in truth, the moment they're canning it or bottling it, because of various bacteria that could be on the equipment or on the line, they have to pasteurize it, or else things could develop in the can or in the bottle. And the moment it's pasteurized, you go back to the same question. Pasteurizing is done with heat. Pasteurizing is done on equipment that could have shared other things that are not kosher. So therefore, you need a good, reliable hashgacha on all these products, even if they seem harmless. And when sometimes they may mention flash pasteurization, that also reaches a hot temperature, just done in a different way, but it's still used with heat, so it's still be a kashrus concern. Now, when it comes to we mentioned the issue with grape and with stam yenam and juices, so we'll go off a bit on something similar to that. It's unfortunately very common. I've seen many times in even restaurants that have hashgacha with a mashgiach, or at parties, birthday parties that have that's with people that's new generally about kashrus, and there's some drinks that people serve at times, and they don't realize that you can have actual grape juice in there, which is not kosher. One example is there's a Snapple flavor. Most Snapple drinks have the okay hashgacha. There is for sure one, it could be more than one, that I think it's a type of fruit punch that has in it actual treif non-kosher grape juice concentrate or grape juice. And many times it's sold in the same case in a variety pack as the ones that are kosher. So we have to be so careful that when there's to be aware of that and to look out for it, because sometimes it may just look like all the bottles, just a different flavor, and that actual drink could be actually not kosher. And this applies some other times as well. There could be other variety packs, whether it's variety packs of candies at times, that some candies in the bag are kosher, some aren't, and we have to realize that, as well as other types of food. So one needs to be extra careful when it comes to that. In regards to juice boxes, the equipment to pack juice boxes, and it's also done with a high level of heat, is a very complex equipment and very complicated as well to kosher. So juice boxes need even stronger hashgacha than your regular hashgacha. You need hashgacha that you're very sure knows what they're doing and really koshered to the highest possible standard due to the complexity of the machinery of the packing of juice boxes. Also mentioning grape, many times questions are asked: could we buy grape flavored products? And Many times there are candies or other things. Sometimes it could be medication like Tylenol, which is grape flavored. Now, sometimes that grape flavor is artificial and has no real grape in it whatsoever. So there wouldn't be a question as long as it has a good hashgacha, or as long as the hashgachas are, let's say for medicine, are saying that it's fine. It could be 100% artificial and have nothing to do with grapes. But at times, there could be products that have contained in it something that actually comes from grapes. If it's grape juice concentrate, if it's grape juice, or if it's something else that's derived from grapes. And obviously, if it has a reliable hashgacha, this hashgacha is doing their part to make sure that al pi halacha, this product is kosher. But the question is if this product is on the muhuder level. And at times consumers don't know what questions to ask. So at times consumers will ask, is the grape juice in this product mevushal? But the mevushal obviously is an important factor, but the hashgacha would never give a hashgacha, if it's a reliable hashgacha, would never give a hashgacha if the grape juice was not mevushal. So obviously the mevushal was dealt with, but there's many other questions that could be asked. What temperature do they consider mevushal? How was it handled at a factory? Different stages of how it's handled. Even when the grapes are being dumped out of the truck, if the dumping is done by a non-Jew, by a guy, and there's so much pressure of the upper grapes, the bottom grapes starts to squeeze already, and that was done by the action of a guy. Some hashgachas consider that already to be an issue. Some hashgachas say no, the guy had no intention to squeeze the grapes; he's just dumping the truck, and there's no issue, and we'll accept it. So when it comes to grape, and that's just one example. Grape production and wine production can have many, many nuances where things can go wrong at any point. Even if a faucet is opened, that because of that, either the grape juice moved or stopped moving or stopped flowing, and that was done by a non-Jew or by a guy, and it wasn't yet mevushal in that process, the entire batch becomes not kosher, becomes tamina. So because of all these nuances, there are people that will want to only use anything that has grape or grape concentrate or grape flavor that comes from that comes from grapes to have a very muhuder hashgacha. And that itself could be an entire few classes just on the production of grape juice and all that and the nuances of that. But just to be aware that even if you are told, yes, obviously it's a good hashgacha and they would never use non-mevushal grape juice, that's not the only question about grape juice. There are many, many more questions that could be that need to be looked into, and grape flavor needs to be a little bit of a red flag if you are trying to keep a higher standard when it comes to kashrus. Once we're on the topic of grape, there's we already touched on this when we were discussing eating out, without a doubt. We talked about products that could possibly be used that are not muhuder. We'll mention it again briefly here. Tartaric acid, which is something that's commonly found in many different types of products, in sodas, even in baking soda at times, and candies, in fake sweeteners, the zero sugar sweeteners. Sorry, not baking soda, but baking powder. And the tartaric acid actually is made from wine stones. Basically, after a wine barrel is emptied and it's drying out, there's little crystals that start to form, which come from the acidity that was within the grapes, and those are called in Yiddish Weinstein, and from those they actually make tartaric acid, or tartar sauce will usually have that, or they'll have the tartar powder. And the regular hashgacha, national hashgacha, like the OU and Chavke and the Starke and the like, they rely on a leniency that if these wine stones, this tartaric acid crystals, are totally dried out until they have no more moisture, even though it came from not kosher wine, it's permissible and you're able to use it. And that's why if you're using an OU, let's say a tartar powder with an OU or another national hashgacha, they're relying on that leniency, which is not everybody agrees with these days. First of all, because even though Shulchan Aruch does allow the idea of using these Weinstein, these winestones, these crystals of tartaric acid when they are dried out for 12 months, because Shulchan Aruch says that after 12 months, there's no more wine to them, there's no more moisture, whatever is left is just dried out and is not an issue. Today, they don't wait 12 months. They artificially dry them in ovens. And the question is, does that accomplish what 12 months would accomplish? A few hours in the oven. And even if you want to say it does, today they specifically harvest and produce this product. It used to be after wine production, and the leftover barrels, they found some crystals and they used to use that. But today there's a whole production specifically putting wine in barrels and emptying it and doing the whole process to produce these crystals. So when you're purposely doing the whole process in order to produce these crystals, some place can feel that that's already not what the halacha was dealing with. And if the whole production is just for that, that can already be clearly more problematic. And therefore, someone who wants to be keeping a higher standard would want to avoid anything with tartaric acid unless it has a very, very good hashgacha. And it's pretty hard to find something with a good hashgacha that's available because there's not too much out there, and whatever is out there is used, especially in the wine industry. Part of production of wine, they do need to. It does involve some tartaric acid, which they need to add, and the hashgachas that are a higher standard, which are certifying wine, will be using tartaric acid from that's done properly from kosher wine. So it's something to be aware of and to look out for as an ingredient, which could be a red flag if you're trying to keep to a higher standard. Something else interesting, which is becoming more and more common, is products that are made from collagen, bovine collagen, which means it's coming from animals like cow, and it has an OU on it, or OU glatt. And the OU, or national hashgachas, would only give hashgacha on collagen coming from an animal that was shechted properly and has no issues halachically. There are some not recommended hashgachas that would give it on any animal, even treif animals, meaning animal that was not shechted, and avelis and treifus. And there's many products on the market with Hebrew lettering and wording and all that, and it's 100% not kosher animals that they're using for that, and they're relying on extremely, extremely weak leniencies that nobody mainstream holds of. But the ones that have a good national hashgacha, like an OU or OK or Chavk, they're getting their collagen from kosher animals that were shechted properly. However, sometimes their poskim hold that it's parv. Because of the whole process, they hold it's parv. So you can sometimes see it'll say parv, OU parv, and someone who's not aware will think it's parv. It's only parv, and then you may use it. It comes from cow, and you may end up using it with milchigs. And not everybody holds that this product is actually parv. It's machlikas, and there's many discussions. Some say that some go to the extreme to say that it's absolutely like meat. Some say that it's somewhere in between. You shouldn't eat it with dairy. You shouldn't mix it with dairy, but you can eat it after dairy. You don't have to wait to eat it, or if you ate it, you don't have to wait 6 hours to eat milk. You just can't do it together. But there's different approaches, and one should speak to their Rav what approach to take. But just to be aware that even if something is labeled parv, at times it could be, and sometimes the OU will have something that says OU glatt D or OUD glatt, which means it's dairy, and it has collagen, which comes from glatt animal in there, and some would disagree and not consider that parv. So another thing to be aware of when shopping out there. Something else on the topic of grapes is grapeseed oil. Grapeseed oil many people like to use because it has a very neutral flavor and a high smoking point. And grapeseed oil is made from crushing seeds that are collected after production of wine or grape juice from non-kosher runs. And the halach is the moment the grape is crushed for wine, not just the grape juice becomes not kosher, but all of it, including the seeds, including the skins, everything over there becomes not kosher, becomes the prohibition, the issur of stam yenam, and that includes the seeds. So halacha mentions again, if the seeds dried out for 12 months, it's okay to use them for different things. So first of all, you have the first discussion about today they don't dry it out for 12 months, they oven dry it. So the question is again, is oven drying something that's sufficient? And that's a discussion. And obviously the ones, the hashgachas, the Heimish hashgachas, those that are taking a higher standard, don't consider it enough and wouldn't give hashgacha on grapeseed oil. So therefore, if you realize it's very, very rare, it's very hard to find grapeseed oil with a Heimish and Mehodik hashgacha, and that's the reason for that. Well, a few more quick things. Sometimes people have asked something very simple. Look at Planters peanuts. It's just peanuts and salt. What could be wrong with that? But if you look closely, some of them will have an OU, some of them will just have a K. The one with a K either actually have gelatin added to help the salt stick to the peanuts, or they're done on the same equipment that has gelatin added to other nuts to help the salt or sugar stick to the nuts. And therefore, there could be gelatin, meaning from chazer, from something that's absolutely not kosher. So keeping an eye out. You may be used to a certain product. Planters peanuts, simple or salted peanuts would be fine. But with the OU, yes, it's fine. But with just the K, it can be a serious issue. And we'll stop here for today.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Zibell, for all of those awarenesses. Okay, for our next class in Hilchos Shabbos, we are excited to continue with part 3 of our new topic, Muktzah. We are grateful to have Rabbi Braun back on our program. Rabbi Braun is the Marza Asra of Crown Heights, and we really appreciate you making time to be here tonight. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. So, following from the shir of last week, it's always following from last week, we spoke about something which is not well known, that part of the rule of Muktzah is that even dishes, regular dishes that are not Muktzah, and you use them in your house, and you eat with them at the meal, if you're moving it shaloi l'soidach klal without any use whatsoever, that's also part of the rules of Muktzah. You can move kelim shaloi l'soidach klal. We went through this last week, and we spoke the background, that originally they made a rule you can't use dishes altogether, unless you're using it to eat from. But if you're going to be moving it because you want to protect the dish, or because you need the place, or you want to do something else with it, you're not allowed to. That was the original rule, because people were very lax in the halachas of Shabbos. Once people started being more careful in the rules of Shabbos, Chazal relaxed their conditions, and that's what we're up to today. And they allowed you to move kelim. I'm talking about kelim, not muktzah kelim, regular kelim that you use on Shabbos, like spoons, knives, forks, regular stuff. They allowed you to use them on Shabbos, to move it if you need a place, to move it if you want to protect the dish, but you can't move it shaloi l'tzoydach klal without any usage. And we spoke last week if somebody is nervous that that's called no usage, or it's a form of usage because your hands are very fidgety. I'm not going to repeat what we spoke last week. And like I always say in the beginning of the shir, it's always a good idea to go back to the archives and listen to last week's shir. But I want to give a few more details about that, and that is there are 2 exceptions to this rule. When we said that you can move anything on Shabbos if there's zero purpose in moving it, if you're moving it purposelessly, I don't know how you would say that, non-purposely, there's 2 exceptions to that rule: food and Shabbos literature. Food is not muktzah whatsoever. Any edibles that you can eat the way it is has no rules of muktzah. If you're moving it without any purpose, moving it from here to there, no problem, because it's food. It doesn't fall under the rubric of muktzah. And the food means even food which is oimid l'schoira. Food is different than anything else. Sometimes if a dish is, you weren't planning on using these dishes, they're set aside, you're planning to sell them. It's there for schoira. So it's muktzah, because you have no usage on Shabbos. No one's going to take out from their hardware store stuff and start using them, because it's made to be sold. It's called oimid l'schoira. But food, even if it's oimid l'schoira, the examples given, I have no idea why these are the examples given. I don't know the business world of those days. I know the business world of these days. For example, if a person has dates and almonds that he's planning to export elsewhere, no idea why almonds and dates are the examples for export, and he really is not planning on using it, doesn't matter. It's not muktzah. It's edible. Edibles are not muktzah. Even fruit that you put aside, note the irony over here, that you're putting it in the term is used, a muktzah. And muktzah is a term, Hebrew term, referred to when you're drying fruit. So there was an art of drying fruit. You take the fruit, in the olden days, people would put it on top of their rooftops. Well, today's age, maybe would put it on your porch, and you let it dry there in the summer, obviously not in the winter, because it's going to rain on it, and you're not going to accomplish anything. So you want to, all those Tu B'Shvat fruits that we buy, dried apricots and dry this and dry that. All those things, today they have machines that do it. But amol, you would put it out in a muktzah. Muktzah is a place, definition of the word muktzah is set aside, which is where all the ideas of muktzah come from, that it's set aside, it's not for Shabbos use. It's pushed aside out of your mind. You're maktzeh daita, you set your mind away from it. So if you put fruit that were put into a muktzah was a reference to the place where you put food to dry, you're also allowed to eat it on Shabbos, even though in your mind, this is out of your mind. You took the fruit, there were beautiful, nice apples and oranges that you planned to eat from them, and then you took them and you said, let me put them into the muktzah box. You know, you have in your house your muktzah drawer. So they had a muktzah box, a muktzah place on the roof, out of mind, out of sight, let it dry there, and it would dry there for a couple of days, months, weeks, whatever amount of time it is. You still allowed to eat it on Shabbos, even though you weren't planning to eat from it, because it's food. Edibles never become muktzah. The only exception to that rule is with figs and grapes. Dried figs, dried grapes, otherwise known as raisins. The minute you stuck it into the muktzah, into the place, the drying area, you weren't allowed to eat it anymore or move it. Because what happens is, it's an interesting thing, different fruits go through different processes in the drying. With dates and grapes, before the grape turns into a raisin, it starts stinking and smelling. Until it dries completely, and then it's delicious raisins. So there's an interim state when it wasn't edible. And the minute there's an interim state where it's not edible, so it becomes muktzah. So the minute you stuck it into the muktzah, that means you had in mind that it's going to become inedible at some stage. Apricots are edible now, and they're going to be edible all along until it finishes drying. Grapes, the minute you stuck it into your muktzah platform, your muktzah box, your muktzah roof, name of the place where you dry things, you know it's going to become inedible, and therefore your mind is off it, and therefore you can't eat it. And in a way, it's actually even worse than any other muktzah, because it's like stones and earth. It has zero. You can't even plan. Okay, before Shabbos, I thought I'm going to have it on Shabbos. The term is used. Dacha isa biyadayim. You push to the side with your hands. It doesn't mean that you physically pushed it away with your hands, but you did something to it. You did an act that I don't want to have this over Shabbos. I'm putting it there to start stinking and smelling. I'm going to have it eventually, only after it dries, which is going to be well after Shabbos. So that's not called edibles. What about food which is edible for some people, not for other people? And the example brought in Shulchan Aruch is, please bear with me, is raw meat. Raw meat, it says in Shulchan Aruch, some people eat and some people don't eat. And halach in Shulchan Aruch, wait till we talk about nowadays, is that you're allowed to move raw meat on Shabbos, because some people are not as finicky as we are, and they're comfortable eating raw meat. And therefore, once there's people that eat it, it's not considered muktzah if anyone's considered an edible. Modern day poskim say, what are you talking about? That was then. Who eats raw meat today? I don't want to go into the sushi discussion. That's because as we're speaking, the dynamics and the food habits are changing in the fish industry. But in the meat industry, as far as I know, still people don't eat raw meat. And even those people that do eat raw meat, biltong, if you know what that is, that's a whole process. You don't just plain eat raw meat. They let it dry for a very, very long time. And it's supposed to be delicious. Ask South Africans, I'll tell you all about it. But stamazai raw meat, people don't eat. Now that could be very, very relevant. You want to take raw meat out of the freezer because as a kid that got a cut, an injury, he got hurt, and you give him an ice pack. So today's day and age, you usually give him an ice cream and ice is, and you tell him that after the boo-boo goes away, you can have it also. That calms the kid down. But if you're taking a package of raw meat is muktzah. Because today's day and age, modern day contemporary poskim, most of them say no, that this halacha doesn't apply anymore because today people don't eat raw meat. Some are a bit more lenient, but yeah, the consensus is that today's day and age raw meat is so. If it's a food that's edible to some people, and as far as I know, there are no such people, and that's where raw fish is different because a lot of people eat raw fish, and that's very, very different. Now, many years ago, a Rav asked me a question, and he asked me, what's taka the halacha? He was learning Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and he discovered that raw meat is not muktzah because some people eat it. He says, he's a Rav of a big shul, and he's giving a shir in Hilchos Muktzah, and nobody eats raw meat today. Is the halacha the same? And I said, indeed, contemporary poskim say the halacha is not the same. Today's day and age, we don't need it, so it's muktzah. He said, yeah, but we do use it nowadays for a wound. So why is it muktzah? It has a usage, a Shabbos usage. So the answer to that question is a very good question. The answer to that question is, yeah, it has usage, but it's not the normal usage. You're not expecting someone to get injured on Shabbos, chas v'shalom. It's like flour. Flour is muktzah. Now, technically, you can make a bracha on flour. The halach is you make a bracha when you eat flour. That means it's edible. But there's normal edible and totally abnormal edible. So even if you make a bracha and it has some level of normalcy attached to eating it, but come on, it's not the normal way of eating. And we have that idea found in Rishonim, in Tosfos, that a lot of people that are sick and they're in a state of danger, they'll eat anything. Everything is suitable for them, but that doesn't take away the rules of muktzah, because people that are not well in the dangerous situation is not the normal kind of situation. So we don't follow the abnormal kind of situation. Whereas medicines, the reason why medicines are not muktzah, shouldn't medicines be muktzah? They have no suitability on Shabbos. Yeah, because medicines have a regular usage. Because a chayla she'ein by sakana, a person, it's time for people to be sick is very common. People to be in a life-threatening situation, well, they'll eat anything. That's not common. So it depends how common it is. So going back to the fact that meat could be used for an injury, it's not very common. It's not made for that. It's made for eating. It's made for eating when it's going to become cooked and edible. And if at today's age, if you would be learning this halacha in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, you would learn that raw meat is not muktzah. But today's day and age, it's not the case. And so let's summarize what we just now said. Forget all the pilpulim that we just went through. You can't move things on Shabbos if it has no purpose, except for food. And we said food means anything which is edible, even if it's edible for some people. Or the second item we mentioned is Shabbos literature. Shabbos literature means, the strict definition of that is, any literature which will provide you with ethical behavior, with Yiras Shamayim, with kosher, good, inspiring, motivational, Jewish religious literature, that's called Shabbos literature, that's not muktzah. And even if you're taking that kosher sefer and you're just moving it around, which I don't know why you would be doing that, shaloi l'tzorech klal, that's not a problem. The Alter Rebbe brings, however, there are those that are permit, and that's the Alter Rebbe brings such a shitta, that any book of wisdom or medical books, since you could read it on Shabbos, according to many opinions, you're allowed to read it on Shabbos, because it's making you smart. It's not necessarily the most inspirational, latest divrei hisoris, ruach atmosphere of Yiddishkeit podcast material, but it's a book that you're learning all about science or whatever it is, or you're learning about medicine, about medical issues. So that there's also opinions that permit you to read that on Shabbos, and the minute there's opinion that permit you to read that on Shabbos, it's called kosher literature. And once it's kosher literature, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos without any purpose. And here comes a very interesting halacha. It's a halacha that whenever people discuss this topic, now my kids' school, I don't know, the literature they're giving them to read for English, I'm not sure if it's acceptable, not acceptable, what kind of chinuch are they giving them, and all those kind of discussions. And the person says, what does it say Shulchan Aruch? So most people look, where in Shulchan Aruch would I find these halachas of what kind of books you can give our students to do a book report on? It's found on Hilchos Shabbos. So in the middle of discussing what you're allowed to read on Shabbos, and it says there that if you're reading books about wars and history, non-Jewish history, or you're reading books with a bunch of different sichas cholon, stam, shtusim. Certainly, if it has a romantic aspect to it, you're not allowed to read it on Shabbos, and you're not even look without saying the words on Shabbos, and even during the week, you're not allowed to, and the lashon is used Mishum Moshe Leitzim. Moshe Leitzim, the first chapter, until Moshe Leitzim Yoshev, you can't be in an environment which is a non-kosher environment. We call it Moshe Leitzim, a non-Yiras Shamayim environment. So reading Goyish history or Sifrei Milchamis, books about their battles and wars, or Melitzis u'Mishalom Shel Sichas Cholon. And there's an example of a particular book which I'm not familiar with, but I'm sure PR people are familiar with it, called Sefer Manuel, which was a book a literature book. Pure, nice, beautiful literature book. It's all about the art of literature, but it's not. So if it's Sifrei Chachma, if it's giving you wisdom, it's teaching you about science, it's teaching you about the anatomy of the body, it's teaching you about biology, it's teaching you about whatever it is, that's fine. But these kind of stuff are forbidden, and certainly if it's romantic. And even in the week, you're not allowed to read that also. On the contrary, things that are history, kosher history, which is Yiras Shamayim, come out of it. There's a book called Yesifon. Yosifim wrote a book. It's not a Torah book, but you learn about the Jewish history. You learn what happened during the time of the Churban. You learn how they brought the Korban Pesach. So you get to meet a Shemaim out of that. You're allowed to read on Shabbos. It says you're not supposed to do any laharbes b'hem. You shouldn't spend too much time on these things. You should be sitting and learning Torah, but that's kosher material. So kosher material is not included in the rules of Muktzah. Now that we had this introduction, let's go through the basic halachas of Muktzah. I just want to put that out on the table. Excuse the pun. So I want to make sure that you know that food and kosher literature are totally beyond the pale of Muktzah, that perfectly fine can move them even without any purpose. And let's talk about the regular Muktzah that we have. And the regular Muktzah that we have, we need to define. So normally we talk about kelim, utensils, dishes, items. And we have a keli which is primarily malachte leheter, which is designated primarily to use for permissible items. We have a keli shemalachte leisser uleheter that's used for both permissible on Shabbos and forbidden on Shabbos items. And then we have something called keli shemalachte leisser, which is used, set aside for forbidden items. Although technically you could find a way to use it for permissible usages. So let's give an example. Cups. Cups are keli shemalachte leheter. Cups are made to do permissible items. It's made for drinking. Not more than 4 times l'chaim, but otherwise it's permissible. Bowls. Knives, those are all keli shemalachte leheter. What would be keli shemalachte leisser uleheter? You have a book, like a phone book, that has in it phone numbers and addresses. Phone numbers is not a permissible usage on Shabbos because you can't use your phone on Shabbos. Addresses is a permissible use because you want to go visit them for an Einik Shabbos or to a Shabbos afternoon visit. So the addresses is the heter part, and the phone numbers is the isser part. That's keli shemalachte leisser uleheter. Whether it's keli shemalachte leheter or keli shemalachte leheter uleisser, they both follow the same category, and that is that you're allowed to move it for any purpose you want, as long as it's not shaloi l'tzorech klal, no purpose whatsoever. So you're allowed to move it for genuine use, certainly. You're allowed to move it l'tzorech makom because you need its place. You're allowed to move it even l'tzorech atzma shel kli, to protect it, because you're afraid people are going to steal it. It's in the sun, it's in the rain, you want to put it in its proper place. Any of those usages is perfectly fine, except if it's shaloi l'tzorech klal. And when I say shaloi l'tzorech klal, so yes, cups, knives, you can't move without a tzorech, without a purpose. Even Shabbos clothing, you can't move without a purpose. But if you're moving it with a purpose, it's fine. Keli shemalachte leisser, however, is not a full-fledged muktzah, but that is real muktzah, but not a full-fledged muktzah. Keli shemalachte leisser is something which is made to use for forbidden things. For example, a hammer. So a hammer is made for forbidden things. You can't stamazeh move a hammer on Shabbos. However, if you're going to do a permissible act with it, or you need a place, then you're allowed to. So you could take the hammer and you could go and crack a nut with it. You can support a dish with it, hold it up. The example given, I don't know what kind of hammer that is exactly, you can cut up a dried fig with it. It's called a tzorech gufay. I'm doing something with it, something kosher with it. Any keli shemalachte leisser, you're allowed to move l'tzorech gufay, to use it for something which is kosher, permissible, or l'tzorech makom because I need a place. But you can't move it l'tzorech hakli atzmai. You can't move it if you want to protect the item. If this item is in a place that you're afraid it's going to be stolen or broken or fall and break, it's going to be in the sun, you want to move it to the shady area, you're not allowed to do that because this is a semi-muktzah. So if you just to make sure that we get the category straight, we have those things that are totally not muktzah, food and Shabbos literature. We have those things that are not muktzah, but you can't move it shaloi l'tzorech klal, which is any keli which has a heter usage, or a heter and an isser usage together. Something which has primarily isser usage, you're allowed to move that on Shabbos. Not to protect that. Only moving because you need a place, because you want to do something with it. So what if you talk a heavy keli shemalachte leisser, you're watching, oh my good hammer, oh my gosh, and I see it's happening, it's about to fall and break. What can you do? You can't move it on Shabbos for that. What's the eitzah? Very simple. Decide that you want to do something with it. And if I think you're allowed to do that, there's no problem with that. I want to go and let me see what can I come up with uses with this tool that I have. Come up with a kosher usage, no problem. Then you can use it, and then it won't fall, and it won't break, and it won't be sitting in the sun. Even better, decide that you want to use the area where the tool is. Now I need this area. Now I need this area. I could go and take it away from this area. Although my real reason between me and you and the lamppost is because I don't want to get stolen. I don't want it to break. That's not a problem. But right now I'm moving it l'tzoyrich makayim because I need a place. So that's the next category of Muktzah. And then we're going to move on to much more serious types of Muktzah. I will mention, just before we wrap up the shir, it's a bit of a lengthy topic, that there's a big, heavy-duty debate, and it's not clear. There are kelim shamlachtam le'isr that you cannot come up with any kosher usage on Shabbos. So maybe that's no longer called kli shamlach. Listen, maybe it goes down a level. And I'll give you an example. An example for that is laundry detergent. What hammers you can open a coconut with? You can even take the screwdriver and mix your coffee if you really like the taste of the coffee after you mixed it with a screwdriver. I remember the old generation used to take their glasses and mix the coffee with their glasses because they wanted to save money on spoons and forks. Yeah. But what do you do with laundry powder? Powder for the machine. It's made for Isser. It's made to do laundry on Shabbos, to wash. It has no other usage. But right now, it's in the middle of my Shabbos table. So Kli Shamlach Talissa, you're allowed to move l'tzoyrich makayim, but maybe it's only Kli Shamlach Talissa that has some type of usage. That's a big machlokes. The Alter Rebbe doesn't address this. Is a big debate what the Alter Rebbe holds about this. Let's share more next week.
Wow, thank you so much. Okay, before we conclude with Tehillim and Mashiach thought, we'd like to reach out to all of our listeners. If you enjoy these important and practical weekly classes, please consider partnering with us so we can keep them going. We rely on and appreciate all the contributions, any amount. You can log on to mikvah.org/donate and select Project Chana Power Hour for your donation to go toward this program. Thank you. Okay, so moving along, let's put a point in tzedakah. You can use an actual pushka, or this is Hillel Chabad pushka, but there's also a great Hillel Chabad pushka app. That's amazing. Okay, and we'll move along and say the Rabb's capital together as well as capital Chaf for Eretz Yisrael. Which we will see on the screen here in just a moment. Okay. Shir Hamaylas the David Lule Adonai Shahaya Lanu Yamar Na Yisrael. Lule Adonai Shahaya Lanu Mukom Alinu Adam. Azai Chaim La'ono B'charis Apan Banu. Azai Hamayim Shtafono Nachla Avar Al Nafshenu. Azai Avar Al Nafshenu Hamayim Hazedenum. Baruch Adonai Shalai Nisananu Taraf L'Shineim Nafshenu Kitzipur Nimlata Mipach Yagshim Hapach Nishbar V'anachnu Nimlatnu Azreinu B'Shem Adonai Aisei Shemaim Ba'aretz. Okay, we'll move along to capital Chaf, which you can say along with me. Am Natseach Mizmor David Yan Chadin Abiyam Zara Yisagab Hashem Elahiyaka Yishlach Azracham Kaidash Minsiani Sadaka Yizkar Hamakaisacha Va'ilascha Yidash Nasela Yitzan Nachacha Vavecha V'chalat Sascha Yimali Nuranina B'Shuasacha B'Shem Elahinu Nidgol Yimali Adonai Kol Mishal Sacha Ati Yitaiti Ki Hashia Adonai Mashicha Yanehu Mishmekadje B'Gvurai Sisha Yiminai Ila V'Racha V'Ila B'Sisim V'Anachnu B'Shem Adonai Elahinu Nasker Hema Karav V'Nafalo V'Anachnu Kamnu V'Anis Aidad Adonai Hashia Hamelech Yaninu V'Yem Karinu. Okay, and now for a Mashiach thought. Hang on tight. So it says in Birchas, which means look upon 3 things and then you won't come to an avera. So a person has to keep in mind the ultimate goal of their avodah. So one might think right offhand that their avodah is between them and Hashem. It's a 2-way thing, right? Between you and Hashem. But what's the truth is that there's a third aspect. You have to reflect upon 3 things. What's the third aspect? It's the world. Our avodah is not only to, perfect ourselves and so on and so forth, but it's for the world and to transform the world into a vessel for Elikos. That's the ultimate intent of creation, and that is why the whole entire world was created. And lastly, a few reminders before we hop off. Number 1, if you appreciate these weekly classes, do share them. Friends and family, anyone else you think would like to hear them. All playbacks are available on mikvah.org/power hour and also on podcast platforms. And new and exciting, we are also available on 24/6. Just search up Project Chana Power Hour. If you have questions on the classes or would like to dedicate a week of learning in honor of someone or lately nishma someone, you can reach out to us via email, projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com. And lastly, we look forward to seeing you again next week. and may our learning prepare us in our homes and bring every Yid home to Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach now. Wishing you a wonderful night.